August 25th, 1944, 2:47 a.m. Route Nationale 13, France. The headlights pierce the pre-dawn darkness like searching fingers, casting long shadows across bomb-cratered French countryside. Corporal Charles H. Johnson of the 783rd Military Police Battalion stands at his checkpoint, his breath visible in the cool morning air. Behind him stretches an endless river of roaring trucks, two once 2-ton Chevrolets and GMCs loaded with gasoline, ammunition, and rations. The Red Ball Express is in full swing. Johnson raises his white-gloved hand, and another convoy thunders past. These aren't just trucks. They're the arteries of Allied victory, pumping 12,000 tons of supplies daily toward the front lines where General Patton's Third Army is tearing across France. The drivers, mostly young African-American men barely out of their teens, grip their steering wheels with determination. They know their cargo could mean the difference between Allied advance and German counterattack. What Johnson doesn't know, what none of them know, is that just 350 miles away, German intelligence officers are staring at maps in underground bunkers, completely blind to this massive operation unfolding before their eyes. In those same bunkers, Wehrmacht generals are rationing individual bullets, desperate to stretch their dwindling supplies for one more day, one more battle. The diesel engines fade into the distance, leaving Johnson alone with the haunting question that would define this war's most spectacular intelligence failure. How could an army that once conquered most of Europe completely miss the greatest logistics operation in military history happening right under their noses? As dawn breaks over France, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold, Johnson waves on another convoy. He has no idea that the very trucks he's guiding past will soon be racing through Belgium, evacuating American fuel depots just minutes before German panzers arrive to find nothing but empty barrels and bitter defeat. The greatest magic trick of World War II is about to be revealed, and the magicians are invisible. Charles Johnson joined the Red Ball Express not as a logistics expert, but as a 22-year-old military policeman from Detroit who understood one thing: keep the convoys moving, no matter what. Red Ball trucks broke, but didn't break, became the unofficial motto of an operation that would transport more cargo than some entire campaigns consumed. But the scale of what Johnson was witnessing defied comprehension. Every day, 900 trucks rolled in continuous loops between the Normandy ports and forward supply depots. The drivers worked in brutal 54-hour shifts, racing at speeds exceeding 60 mph through blackout conditions on roads reserved exclusively for their convoys. They carried everything an advancing army needed: 750 tons per division per day of gasoline, ammunition, rations, medical supplies, and spare parts. General Ewart G. Plank, the operations commander, had declared with characteristic American boldness, "Let it never be said that a lack of supplies stopped Patton when the Germans couldn't." It was more than bravado. It was a promise that would reshape the war's trajectory. 350 miles east, in the concrete bunkers of the Siegfried Line, a very different reality was unfolding. German intelligence officers, once the masters of European warfare, were operating with the strategic vision of men looking through keyholes. Their Abwehr intelligence service, crippled by internal conflicts and Allied air superiority, had lost the ability to see beyond their immediate front lines. Major General James L. Kennedy's classified analysis revealed the shocking truth. By September 1944, German fuel production had collapsed from 200,000 tons per month to just 50,000 tons. Their military was consuming 70,000 tons of fuel monthly, while producing only 26,000 tons of aviation fuel. A death spiral that German planners either couldn't or wouldn't acknowledge. While Johnson's convoys carried millions of gallons of gasoline toward the front, German commanders were implementing fuel rationing so severe that training flights were canceled, reconnaissance missions abandoned, and tank units ordered to conserve every drop for combat operations. German intelligence, starved of aerial reconnaissance, became deaf and blind to Allied movements. What German intelligence failed to detect wasn't just significant, it was war-changing. Between August 25 and November 16, 1944, the Red Ball Express would transport 193 tons of critical supplies. To put this in perspective, this exceeded the total tonnage capacity of many major ports, yet it was moving over narrow French country roads by truck convoy. Johnson watched convoys that stretched for miles, sometimes over 100 trucks in a single formation. At any given moment, the equivalent of a small city's worth of vehicles was racing across France and Belgium. The operation required 23,000 personnel, primarily African-American soldiers who had been relegated to support roles by military, leaders who believed they lacked the intelligence for combat duties. The irony was devastating. The very soldiers dismissed as intellectually inferior were executing the most sophisticated logistics operation in military history, while German intelligence, supposedly the pinnacle of military professionalism, remained completely oblivious to their existence. By December 1944, the contrast had become stark. Johnson's Red Ball Express had evolved into multiple convoy systems, each moving thousands of tons daily. American supply depots near Spa, Stavelot, and Malmedy held millions of gallons of fuel and ammunition, enough to sustain entire armies for months. Meanwhile, German forces preparing for what would become the Battle of the Bulge possessed enough fuel for exactly 6 days of operations. Hitler had ordered his commanders to rely on capturing American supplies during their offensive. It was a plan born of desperation and complete ignorance of Allied capabilities. German General Joseph Sepp Dietrich commanded an entire panzer army, but had to ration fuel so severely that his tank crews couldn't conduct proper reconnaissance or movement training. His forces possessed 500 tanks, but lacked the fuel to operate them effectively for more than a week. The stage was set for one of history's most dramatic reversals, an intelligence failure so complete that it would determine the war's outcome. Johnson continued waving convoys past his checkpoint, unaware that each truck represented German intelligence's growing blindness to the industrial might bearing down on them. The German artillery barrage that launched the Battle of the Bulge shattered the frozen morning air with thunderous violence. 3 German armies, 250,000 men, and 1,500 tanks burst through the snow-covered Ardennes, catching American forces completely by surprise. For German intelligence, it should have been their moment of vindication, their proof that they could still execute brilliant deception operations. But at 7:15 a.m., just 90 minutes after the attack began, Corporal Charles Johnson received an urgent radio transmission that would expose the full scale of German intelligence failure. Red Ball units, emergency supply evacuation protocol. Move immediately to Depot Spa, Stavelot, and Malmedy. Evacuate all fuel stocks before enemy contact. Johnson's heart raced as he realized the implications. The advancing German panzers were heading directly toward the largest fuel concentrations in Western Europe. Depots, that is, Red Ball convoys, had been building for months. If the Germans captured these stocks, their offensive might actually succeed. What followed was the most dramatic logistics operation of the war. Red Ball Express drivers, most of them African-American soldiers who had never expected to be in combat zones, suddenly found themselves racing directly toward the sound of German guns. Johnson coordinated convoy after convoy of fuel trucks speeding toward depots that were already within German artillery range. The drivers knew the stakes. Each truck carried 2,500 gallons of gasoline, enough to fuel a German tank company for days. Master Sergeant William McBurney, a 24-year-old driver from Chicago, later recalled, "We could hear the German artillery getting closer with every load, but we kept going back. Those tanks couldn't have our fuel. As German advance units of the 1st SS Panzer Division raced towards Stavelot, Red Ball drivers were literally emptying the depot under fire. Trucks loaded with fuel barrels roared past German reconnaissance elements in a deadly game of timing. Belgian civilians joined the evacuation, forming human chains to load trucks faster than German tanks could advance. At 3:47 p.m. on December 17th, Obersturmbannführer Joachim Peiper's spearhead unit of the 1st SS Panzer Division reached the massive Stavelot fuel depot. What they found defied their understanding of warfare itself. The depot was enormous. Concrete storage tanks that could hold millions of gallons, railway spurs for fuel trains, and loading facilities that rivaled major oil refineries. Yet it was completely empty, not just low on fuel, completely empty, as if it had been systematically drained by an industrial operation. Peiper's radio communications, intercepted by Allied forces, revealed German shock. The fuel depot is empty, completely empty. There are tire tracks everywhere. Hundreds of trucks must have been here. How is this possible? Our intelligence reported no major supply operations in this sector. German intelligence had been so completely blind to Red Ball Express operations that they hadn't even included Allied logistics capabilities in their offensive planning. Hitler's directive to capture American fuel supplies assumed those supplies would be sitting in predictable, defendable locations, not constantly moving in massive convoy operations that could evacuate entire depots within hours. By December 19th, the German fuel crisis became critical. General Hasso von Manteuffel's 5th Panzer Army, spearheading the main offensive, began reporting tank units completely out of fuel just 20 miles from their starting positions. The 2nd SS Panzer Division ground to a halt after crossing the Orthe River, not because of Allied resistance, but because they had burned through their 6-day fuel allocation in 3 days of combat. Johnson, now coordinating emergency resupply operations, watched American trucks racing past German positions that had been abandoned due to fuel shortages. The irony was staggering. German tanks worth millions of dollars sat motionless in Belgian fields, while American trucks loaded with fuel drove past them to supply Allied counterattacks. The most shocking discovery came from captured German documents. Wehrmacht intelligence estimates suggested the Allies possessed perhaps 50 to 100 trucks in their immediate supply operations. The actual number, over 6,000 trucks in the Red Ball Express alone, with multiple additional convoy systems operating simultaneously. German General Alfred Jodel's war diary, discovered after the war, contained this devastating admission. Our intelligence failed to detect the existence of American supply operations involving thousands of vehicles. We planned to capture fuel supplies that had already been evacuated by truck convoys we never knew existed. Johnson realized he had witnessed the greatest intelligence failure in military history. An entire German army had launched a major offensive based on supply assumptions that were months out of date. They had been fighting shadows while the real Allied logistics operation operated in plain sight, invisible to their reconnaissance. As German panzers ran out of fuel across the Ardennes, Johnson's Red Ball trucks continued their relentless movement, now carrying ammunition and reinforcements to American units counterattacking the stalled German offensive. The Invisible Army had become the decisive force in the battle, and German intelligence never saw them coming. By December 25, 1944, the Battle of the Bulge was effectively over, though fighting would continue into January. German forces, starved of fuel and supplies, began their final retreat toward the Rhine. Corporal Charles Johnson watched German prisoners trudging past his checkpoint, hungry soldiers from the same panzer divisions that had launched the offensive just 9 days earlier. The statistics told the story of German intelligence's catastrophic failure. Hitler had committed 1,500 tanks to the offensive. By December 30th, over 800 had been abandoned due to fuel shortages. The Red Ball Express, operating continuously throughout the battle, had delivered 23,000 tons of supplies to Allied counterattacking forces, more tonnage than some entire German armies possessed for the entire offensive. Johnson's role in this intelligence failure was representative of thousands of African American soldiers whose contributions remained largely invisible to history. The 783rd Military Police Battalion alone had coordinated the movement of over 50,000 tons of supplies during the battle, yet their story would remain untold for decades. The German intelligence failure surrounding the Red Ball Express had consequences far beyond a single battle. German forces had exhausted their strategic fuel reserves, accumulated over months, in less than 2 weeks of combat. Production Minister Albert Speer's post-war analysis revealed that Germany's fuel reserves, already critically low, were completely depleted by the Ardennes offensive. More significantly, the failure demonstrated the collapse of German strategic intelligence capabilities. An intelligence service that had once coordinated the conquest of Europe could no longer detect massive Allied operations occurring within 50 miles of German positions. The Red Ball Express had operated in plain sight for 4 months without appearing in a single German intelligence assessment. Today's military logistics experts study the Red Ball Express as a masterclass in supply chain management under pressure. The operation moved 412,193 tons of supplies over 82 days using 1940s technology and determination. Modern AI and satellite surveillance make such intelligence failures theoretically impossible, yet the lessons remain relevant. Assumptions about enemy capabilities can prove fatal, and invisible operations often prove more decisive than visible battles. Johnson returned to Detroit after the war, carrying the knowledge that he had participated in one of history's most significant intelligence failures, from the winning side. He understood that wars are won not just by those who fight, but by those who feed, fuel, and supply the fighters. The Red Ball Express proved that in modern warfare, logistics is strategy, and intelligence failures can be more decisive than tactical defeats. Sometimes the most important victories are won by invisible heroes driving trucks through the darkness, while the enemy counts bullets they'll never have enough of to win. The next time you see a supply truck on the highway, remember, logistics wins wars, and the unsung heroes who keep supplies moving shape history in ways that generals and politicians never could.